and welcome everyone to a very special interview today. And I'm very humble and honored to be sharing this space with Laura and Serene. We are, for those viewers who have been aware of some of the previous interviews that I've been doing, this is following a very similar storyline. Basically, we are seeing the attack on innocent mothers, more so now from our system, and it's quite a hard thing for me to even hear about and even witness when I attend court hearings. And when I say system, we're talking about, you know, the police, and not all police, but a lot of corrupt police. We're talking about our judiciary, the family courts, child protection services. And I'm really pleased to be sharing this space with someone that is speaking out about what has happened to her, because one of the most important tools we have is our voice. And when we're told we can't speak and we're put into fear, we've got to definitely rise above that. So I just want to welcome you guys. How are you guys going today?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, not too bad. Obviously a bit nervous, about doing this interview and speaking out when I've kind of been warned against talking, and, when speaking out in the past has kind of put me in the situation where I am in now. But like you said, it's really important. I think the more that they push against me and try and silence me, the more important it is to find my voice. So
Definitely.
yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Of course. I've been following your story for a little while now, and there are a lot of people in your corner, a lot of people supporting you, and people that you don't even know are there. We're all thinking of you. Now, for those that may have not actually heard about your story and what has happened, maybe just give us a little bit of a background of what you were doing, I guess, just before this sort of nightmare unfolded, and what has actually taken you to where you are sitting today with us.
Yeah, okay. So I was a single mum, and I was working and studying in mental health. And I was studying to be a yoga teacher as well, a trauma-informed yoga teacher. And I was actually going through some custody stuff at the time with my youngest two children's father. And it was getting quite nasty and quite heated, and that he was trying to push to get full custody at the time. But it didn't look like it was going in his favour because of the fact that, he wasn't thinking about the children's best interests. So for the moment, they were primarily in my care. And we lived a pretty hectic life, in between trying to balance, all their activities and school and preschool and my work and studies, and doing that as a single parent without family here. But I'd say, I was managing pretty well, and we had a pretty happy, full life. And then it was December of 2021. My youngest daughter was 4 at the time, and she made disclosures to me, disclosures of abuse allegations. So I did what, I thought you were meant to do, and as per my, mandatory obligations, then I went to the police, and I reported those disclosures. And very quickly, within a matter of like 3 days of making these disclosures to the police, or telling the police my daughter's disclosures, reporting them, my children were taken away from me. So my daughter, she had the CFI, so a child forensic interview. So that's when the child goes in to be interviewed by themselves without any other adult, just them and a member of the police. And yeah, the very next day, I do not know to this day what was said in there, but the very next day I had child protection services and the police on my doorstep, with a protection order for my children under the grounds that I told a police officer I was suicidal. That never happened. And even though to this day that's unsubstantiated, that's what they used to remove my children. And then they went on to say that I had coached my daughter to make these allegations, and they maintained that as a reasoning for them to remove my children.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Well, I don't have children, but that's it's like an inner instinct of like the worst nightmare coming true, and so quickly. How they can use the system that we're living in, man's law, in other words, and turn it against people like yourself, like Serene. Obviously there are other cases occurring in a similar manner with Anne Greer in Queensland, and I've heard of many other cases. I just had a phone call today of a mother who lost 7 of her children. Same sort of stuff. Like, it's the system targeting. Perhaps there's probably a specific, I would say, criteria that a mother would need to be in for them to be able to target someone that is vulnerable. Serene, maybe you can talk a little bit about, because you've seen a little bit of this as well.
Yeah. Look, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but your camera's frozen. Oh, there you are.
Yes, thank you, darling. Yes, look, this is a very, very complex area, particularly around the factors that lead to this type of targeting by police, the judiciary, the CDPP, the prosecutors, both Commonwealth and the state. But I honestly can very much safely say now that I see a agenda pushed by, I can't call it anything else but pedophiles and perpetrators that are really driving key decisions and key decision making around the targeting of children and protective parents. And I say protective parents because I do acknowledge that sometimes it happens to fathers too. But in the majority of cases, unfortunately, that power paradigm is very much squarely and fairly against protective mothers and protective grandmothers. And what I see is that there is an agenda targeting really kind, very astute, bright alternative mothers. So they could be like vegans, they could be some things I've heard in court about vegan mothers, it's just insulting, to be honest. Yoga teachers, like Laura is very soft, very softly spoken women, very pretty, very beautiful inside and out, very caring, very much about homeschooling, for example. If they want to promote homeschooling, if they are concerned about over vaccination, they will be earmarked and targeted by very, very brutal female judges, would you believe, as well. So female police officers, female judges, female child protection workers as well. So it's not just a biological thing that's playing out. I also think it's a systemic thing that is coming through these institutions that is polarizing the attitudes of these judges and police. And really, it's about this soft, clearly women that have never had history before, like no criminal history. And then all of a sudden they find themselves treated like they are the worst criminals. I've never seen anything like it in my life, I would say. I've never seen anything like it, but it's this very typical patterns that I've picked up, very similar profiling of these really engaged, intelligent women that unfortunately get themselves involved. And this is no criticism to Laura or any of these women, but unfortunately they get themselves involved with very duplicitous and criminal-minded men, unfortunately. Okay, and it is very much like that. I've seen men who are involved in drugs and organized crime, child trafficking, child sexual abuse, involved in police, have relationships with in the community, have money, have resources, and that's also typical on the other side of what I've seen, and it is truly beyond belief.
And as well, sometimes I don't know about your case, Laura, but usually the more extreme cases that I've seen where they're targeted more severely is because a child's disclosure is linked to either a pedophile ring or perhaps high-profile individuals in our country that could perhaps expose them. Now, I don't know exactly what your daughter. I have actually heard the disclosures, but it's frightening because, well, it is frightening, but we can't be in fear about it because what is happening is wrong, and it's morally wrong, and it's satanic, it's demonic, it's an energy that must have the light shone on it, has to have it, because there's no other way we will beat this. And I am really just in awe of your strength, Laura. I know that I can't even imagine what you must be going through on a day-to-day basis. But if anything, what I'm seeing with you is that you bring hope to other people. And it's a very special thing that you got to hopefully, well, we'll just have to see how things turn out. But maybe we can talk a little bit about, because you're being criminalized and you've been taken through three different jurisdictions, if that's correct.
Yeah, that's right. So the family court, the children's court, and now the criminal court.
Right. And the charges all linked to child abduction?
So yeah, I've got charges in the criminal court for child abduction and attempted child abduction of my son. And in the family court, it's obviously, I'm trying to fight to have access to my daughter. And in the children's court, my son, who's now 12, he's autistic, and territory families, so that's Child Protective Services, have actually taken him, and they've taken him under a 2-year order, and they've actually denied me any access to him, even though there's been a court order made that I am to have access to him. Like, I'm allowed to have phone calls with him, I'm allowed to write letters with him, and they just keep making excuses that they're understaffed and just basically trying to keep me from having any sort of contact with my son. Yeah, it's not easy. I think the thing that I worry about the most, though, is it's not me. Like, I'm struggling. I'm not gonna lie. There are some days when I don't even want to get out of bed, and I can't stop crying, and I grieve my children. But I worry about the impact this is having on them.
Yeah. Serene, maybe sort of from your perspective, having worked in law, how is it possible for a mother to abduct her own child? Because that to me is what?
Yeah.
Like, what the heck? I'm sorry, it's just like, it's unbelievable.
Yes, this is very much about criminalizing mothers, and it is a very insidious attack that is now we're seeing by the family court. I say the family court, in my opinion, is unconstitutional because it's tried to take over welfare decisions of children. And then you've got these judges who are sitting there acting like judge, jury, and executioner, and then they decide there's this thing called parental responsibility. And so constitutionally, a parent is a parent. You can't just all of a sudden switch off parenthood to say, oh, you're no longer responsible for this child. In my opinion, constitutionally, you're always obligated to the child. No one can take away that obligation unless we're talking about severe abuse, right? And it would have to be extremely severe, okay, where the state would have to intervene. But what we have here is that it's not the state that's intervening, it's the Commonwealth, because the family court is sitting on the top there, and these Commonwealth judges, okay, are interfering in state welfare decisions, and then they are so brutal. I really truly believe that the family court has been taken over by the pedophile agenda. I mean, some people call it parental alienation syndrome and all that, but the genesis of that is pedophilia, and it is about attacking the identity of women and children, and it is about encouraging and condoning child abuse, because you could go to the family court and have proven charges against a father who is a convicted pedophile, and the family court will give the father access to the children. I've got plenty of cases where it's as extreme as that. I was targeted myself personally as well. Domestic violence is supported and assisted. Okay, I was personally targeted by the client's father and his
Wow.
lawyers, and the judges basically fed me to them. It was something out of I've never seen anything like this in my life. It's so backward. It's like we're back again in the Roman gladiator times. You're walking into the courts and you're in the gladiator zone. But coming back to this parental responsibility, they fabricated this thing called parental responsibility, and they brought it under the Family Law Act. And then you've got these judges overnight who will hear cases without even a parent being there, as Laura. It happened with Laura. The family court
Really?
made a decision. She didn't instruct her lawyers. She wasn't there. She didn't understand what happened, and without her being there, they took away her parental responsibility. Just one day she's a engaged, beautiful parent who's taking care of her children, and she has all the parental responsibility and all the care. The next minute, we're going to take that away because some a child protection officer or police officer stood there and said, we don't like her. So that's all it required. We don't like this woman, so we're going to just take away her children ex parte. We're going to actually not have her there. So they impose these unilateral decisions that are so entirely corrupt. They remove the Evidence Act. Under what law does the Family Law Act removes the Evidence Act, which is a keystone in our law, that you have to have certain rules of evidentiary burdens, okay, how you prove something. So they say hearsay becomes acceptable, so someone can stand up and it becomes a tit for tat.
Oh my
And
God.
yes, and so it becomes a who's screaming the loudest, who's got the biggest barristers, who's got the biggest money, who's throwing more money at these psychiatrists, and it becomes very eugenics. It's an experiment in eugenics, the family court. That's what I believe, and it's very much about experimenting on the destruction of family. Okay, they've done a great job in single-handedly destroying families and promoting pedophilia. And so family responsibility comes in. Now, under the Criminal Act, under the criminal law, there are criminal offenses. Now, the criminal offenses are much older than this new Family Law Act that has decided, oh, we're going to now take away your role as a parent. And when they take away your parental responsibility, they don't just cut the parent off the children, they cut the aunties, the uncles, the grandparents, the whole extended family is expunged. All of a sudden, this judge is coming in and is saying, you're no longer this parent anymore. We're not going to even acknowledge. How do you take away the parent's role as mother or father? How do you take away the identity of a mother as a mother? It doesn't make sense. So the criminal offenses that are older than these new statutory type categorizations under the Family Law Act say that abduction, to abduct a child, you have to be someone other than a parent. Clearly, someone other than a parent, because the role of the abduction charges, the seriousness of them, is a stranger taking a child into their care where they have no claim to the children. And in essence, what the police has done is do almost a triple jeopardy for Laura. They're punishing her now under the Family Law Act for breaching the orders that she wasn't even there when they were made. Okay, then she's been criminalized as a parent for abducting a child when it's impossible under the terms of the Act to define a parent as a stranger. So we've appealed this, and of course, child protection is there in the background, just making a complete mess. And as Laura said, and listen to this, is a very important part of this case. The child protection thought the father was good enough to have the daughter, but because he didn't want his son anymore, they gave the son to the state. So the son is in foster care whilst he has the daughter. How is that consistent? How is that fair? How is that not an indicator of some serious, seedy, inconsistent stuff that is at the core of this case? Okay, this is how absurd. Yes, this is how crazy and absurd they are, and this is happening right here, right in this country. And so these criminal prosecutors. So Laura is not just being punished in one court; she's being punished in the Commonwealth Court, in the state courts, and in the criminal courts for the same thing. I haven't even seen a pedophile or the worst of libertines or the worst of offenders be punished by 3 courts. I've only seen it for yoga teachers and vegans. They're going to get the weight of the law. Okay, little yoga teachers. Oh, yeah, with no criminal offense. A mother who loved her children. Oh, we're going to put the heavies on her. And this is happening in this country. She's got the Northern Territory Police on her. The family court judge on her. She's got the magistrates on her. She's got the prosecutors on her. She's got child protection on her. I can't believe that one person can have that many people on them. Okay, and she's being all the while as well lies about her character, lies about her mental health. She's one of the sanest people I've met in the throes of all of this. And so we did a court case. We put a court case to challenge the legalities. It's a judicial review. We're challenging how the state and how the family court is viewing a parent. We're saying you've got no right to criminalize her. She is not a stranger to this child. And what did the court decide? Absurdly, the judge said, oh, parental responsibility. If we take away parental responsibility, it takes away her role as a mother, right? So now we have judges that are not just taking away parental responsibility, they're taking away her birthing, the fact that she birthed this child. It's beyond belief. And this is all in writing, and obviously we're going to appeal it.
Well, obviously. Now, I think the first question that comes to my mind, and it's probably will be going through all the minds of the viewers, is, Laura, why do you think that they're so after you? Why? What is it that you think that? I don't know if you can answer this, but what is it? Is it something? Is it just
I obviously have to be really careful with what I say at the moment because I'm right in their clutches, and so are my children, and just for my safety and their safety for the minute, I have to be a bit careful with what I do say. I think a lot of people are aware of, like, this goes pretty deep. There's some, it's not just like a regular custody battle going on here. There's a lot more to it than that. But yeah, I'm just going to say, like, there's obviously a lot of corruption going on here, and it's very evident for people that even have come in like halfway through and just watched, certain things unfold, have seen meetings with like Territory Families caseworkers, and have seen like just certain things play out. And it's really easy to see, even as someone that doesn't really have an understanding of this, that there is a lot of corruption going on here. There's something really funny going on there. Yeah, I would just say that.
That's okay. I understand. Yes, we do. That's the thing. A lot of things can be used against you.
Yeah.
And so we've got to be careful what we say, unfortunately. And
And unfortunately, the mental health card is a big one they like to pull a lot, because of my history of trauma from abuse and domestic violence, and that, there were times when my mental health wasn't great and I had to, go on medication and, get therapy to heal from that. But unfortunately, our system is not trauma informed, and they don't understand that being a victim of childhood abuse and sexual abuse and domestic violence, funnily enough, at the hands of the father, of course, is going to impact my mental health at that time. It doesn't make me crazy or delusional or unfit to be a mother, but they're using that as, as weight behind that argument as to why they took my children. So whenever I speak out about the corruption and what's going on here, they start screaming mental health and say, see, she's crazy, she's delusional. Yeah, even though recently I've had a psychiatric assessment that clears me of those labels. So, but they continue to use them anyway.
of course they do. And I know that you've been targeted in the media as well, quite heavily. And something that also draws quite a big red flag to this whole mess. Now, just to clarify, when your child did begin the disclosures, so when you reported them, was there an actual investigation that took place? Or was it just a sort of like a I don't know if you could sort of elaborate on that, because how is the media supposed to report on something when they haven't actually asked you questions? From what, as far as I'm aware, they're reporting on things that have taken place. And so I'm just a little bit, it sounds, well, I don't know if we can really believe the media, right? Because what have they been saying about you?
One side of a story, that's it, and that's what they're running with. They didn't have any of my side of the story. They hadn't spoken to me. So
no one spoke to you?
No.
And yet they've gone ahead with these defamation sort of stories, and which is quite atrocious. We don't really have a media here in this country at all. So let me just actually, something that also I would like to know, because I think it's a little bit different in each state, but there are suppression orders that I know that are quite heavy, where we can't name children if they've been disclosed abuse. Now, because the media actually went public with your name and your daughter's name, did they actually break those suppression orders, Serene?
Oh, yes, they did. Oh, yes, they did with her. They can go and break it. The police can break everything and anything they like. And that is why in Laura's case, it's quite an interesting case. And that's why I believe it's the case that is one of the most important cases now in this country. I will tell everybody listening, this is the most important case in the country. Apart from Operation Noetic, which is against Anne Greer and Dr. Russell Pridgeon, but I mean, you couldn't get more innocent than innocent when it comes to Laura, and you most certainly can't get more malicious as to how they've gone ahead and treated Laura and Grace. I mean, I could say Grace because the media has put Grace's picture all over the news. And they've put Laura in harm's way. They've absolutely exposed Laura to complete and utter harm. And yet, it's become fair game because she's actually had a trial by media, not even by court. Her trial is a trial by media. And this is where the absolute morons down at Northern Territory, I could safely say that, okay, because when you've got hundreds of officers wearing balaclavas to go out and
I've
make
seen that
these
footage.
arrests.
I've seen that footage, and that is scary. No name tags, nothing like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, who is the criminals? They're wearing balaclavas. Who's the criminal? Please, you could put that as a lineup for 2-year-olds, and they could tell you who the criminals are. If you put Grace's picture and Laura's picture with all the police that are dressed in balaclavas, I think we could be very certain about who's acting with criminal intent here. Okay, this could not be more repulsive, even if they've tried. And this is where I say it's fair game for Laura. We put this judicial review. At first instance, I've got absolutely no trust in these judges, and they call themselves magistrates, not even judges, because they're on that lower level. Okay, you just cannot take them seriously, these judges or magistrates at first instance. This will be appealed to the Supreme Court, and then if that fails, and it's very likely to fail up in the Northern Territory, we will take it to the High Court, because the High Court has to see, they have to accept now that there is persecution that is happening in the most disgusting sense. They sit there and threaten mothers and their children with Section 121 of the Family Law Act, which is, interpreted as suppression orders. It's not even suppression orders. What it is that you can't discuss it for the benefit of the children. But then they get the Australian Federal Police to come after you. But in this case, thanks to the stupidity of the Northern Territory Police, and we're so thankful to you, Northern Territory Police, for your absolute stupidity, okay, in actually plastering Laura and Grace's name everywhere, because whilst this has put her in danger, it's also given her some protection, because she can now talk about this. We can talk about this because it's trial by media. And if they want to go trial by media, well, we know we've got the best media here with Julia. So we'll give them trial by media.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot for people to fathom that this is happening right in front of our faces. Because when people think about trafficking, or when they think about sexual abuse, there is an image of it happening in a in a scenario where it's sort of sold to us in movies, in TV shows, and so when people hear about this, people don't believe it. And this is why I have personally gone and started attending these court hearings, like in Brisbane and Sydney, and why I've started paying attention, listening to stories. And unfortunately, what I'm witnessing is I have to sometimes pinch myself, because it's not the world that I was brought up in my family. And it's just going to take constant talking about this, constant shining of the light on this, because people need to understand of how what's the real world that we're living in. And if people think that their children are safe, with what's happening in the school systems now, they're taking away rights for all parents, and they're using anything that they can. Just look at the Operation Noetics case. That, I think, from what I understand, is future crime they're charging them with now. Like, it's unbelievable. It's a very, very dangerous game that they're playing, and we need to have constant attention on this. Laura, are you able to tell us some of the consequences that you may be facing if these trials and court hearings are successful on their behalf?
Yeah, so in the criminal court at the moment, they are trying to push to have me sentenced a maximum of 15 years in prison. So that's for the abduction of my own daughter and the attempted abduction of my son. Yeah, so that's 15 years maximum prison sentence, and they are pushing for that. And then, of course, in the children's and family court, there is, they're trying to deny me having any access to my children, saying that I'm a risk because I believe that they have been abused, and I won't drop that view. So they're saying that I'm a risk to their mental health. So yeah, at the moment, I guess the most pressing issue is the fact that they want to put me behind bars for 15 years for trying to protect my children. You know, as opposed to, you know, it makes no sense. Like, you know, we were saying before, like it is so polarized where, you know, here in the Northern Territory, you know, for brutally sexually assaulting the child, you go away for a few years, you know, but for trying to protect your own child because you believe that, you know, they are being abused, you're facing 15. Like, it's just, it makes no sense at all. So it's just ridiculous and disproportionate, you know. And of course, my worry is that if I've been put away for 15 years behind bars, I've missed the whole of my children's childhood, and I've not, you know, I'm not going to be there to keep fighting for them because, you know, obviously I don't believe that they're safe. And yeah, so that's really my main concern at the moment, is fighting these criminal charges so I can keep fighting for my children.
Which is probably which makes sense why they don't want you to fight for your children. If anything, that the one thing that they want to do is break that bond, that sacred bond between you and your children. When was the last time you've seen both of your youngest children?
So since they removed them from my care, December 2021, I had a handful of supervised visitations with them.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until I think it was July, late July or early August, I think. Yeah, late July of 2022, when I started having supervised visitation with them again. There was like a big gap in between where I hadn't seen them for months on end. And this was because in April of 2022, my youngest daughter had made more disclosures to me at a supervised visitation, and I reported those disclosures, and then I was punished for doing that and alienated from her further, accused of coaching again. So then it really took a lot of like really pushing and, you know, and trying to fight in the legal system to get access to my children again. But I had to do that at a supervised visitation centre. And it was only fortnightly where I'd get an hour. And, you know, like I said, this was, you know, my other children too. Like my eldest daughter, she found it a bit too much for her, and she didn't want to have a part in it. She didn't want to have to see her siblings at a supervised visitation centre. But my eldest son would come with me every time, and, you know, so he was subject to that as well. Like he, you know, my 14-year-old son would have to see his siblings at a supervised visitation centre, you know, like he was being punished as well. Yeah, so, and then obviously, you know, my youngest daughter again was making more disclosures, and that's when, you know, that's how it came to the point where I was, you know, charged with abducting my own child, because it got to that point where I was desperate.
As any mother would be.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that we sort of need to sort of mention?
No, I don't think so. Not really. I guess I wanted to mention too, like, going off what Serene said before about, you know, when they alienate a child or children from a protective parent, they don't just alienate them from that parent, it's that parent's whole family.
Yeah.
And what they seem to, you know, people don't realize is I have other children. I have an older son and an older daughter that haven't seen their siblings parents, you know, and are not allowed any contact with them. And my oldest son, he's 14, and his mental health is really struggling. Like he's become really like disengaged and doesn't want to talk to anyone, shuts himself away in his room, because he's really hurting that he can't have contact with his little sister and his little brother. And you know, and you see this happen all the time where they're not just alienating the parent, it's the other siblings as well. And it's really unfair. They're destroying whole families, just like what Serene said. And, yeah, like I'm shocked too to see that, you know, this isn't just an isolated situation. You know, this happens a lot all over the world. Like the amount of mostly women, but some men as well, that have contacted me since this with the media to tell me, like, oh my gosh, this is also very similar to my story. This happened to me. I was alienated from my children because I reported abuse. So, you know, I think people need to realize that there's a lot more to the story. Like, you know, the impact, it goes so wide. You know, it's not just the protected parents and the children involved. It's the entire family unit that is affected.
And obviously, I can imagine that the court fees aren't very cheap, and they obviously are adding up. And so is there any way people, if are listening to your story, can sort of help you donate money or anything like that? Is there anything that we can continue to support you with?
Well, yeah, to be honest, probably Serene is best talking about this. I'm not really clued up on it. She's actually been amazing. She's been the one that's helped me with the criminal case up until now, and well, continues to do so. And you know, she was helping to fund my barrister, but it's just got to a point where it's just not financially viable, and you know, not able to raise the funds. So Serene was actually funding it herself. And you know, I can't expect that of her. So yeah, so Serene is, you know, helping me as much as she can at the moment. Bless you, Serene.
Oh, thank you, Laura.
The time is such an earth angel. I'd be completely lost without you. I really would, and I'm sure many other you know, people out there as well in my situation that have you to thank for.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you, darling. I really, honestly, I'm furious, to be honest. I'm furious about this. You know, I really encourage my followers and clients to help out with this, because I will take it all the way. I'd love their help. I'd love to get their support. I will put an account. Maybe you can put that linked up to this interview, Julia. I mean, as Laura said, I mean, I feel so passionate about these issues. I also feel very passionate about people like Laura, who of her character and quality. I feel truly disgusted, so deeply revolted by what is happening. And I really hope that people listening to this will understand that this is really one of the most important cases. I want to take it all the way. I think enough is enough. I think a lot of women, it's been decades of women and children suffering. It's just not fair that all of her children are now suffering. All of Laura's children are, the cruelty that they're being exposed to. I can't even find words for this. How can we all stand there and just think that that's okay when it's not okay? So I'm happy to provide a link, and if you wanted to donate, please put Laura as the Laura or Grace, you know, as the tagline. And also I wanted to make a couple of just two further points. Sexual abuse and abuse, it's not just sexual abuse, just abuse of children has been reported by women in 3-in-1 cases. Okay. And in boys, it's probably just as much, it's just not reported. that should reveal that abuse often happens at home by people that you know, okay? And they're the ones that then facilitate the abuse of the children by themselves and others. It's so important to understand that that is the most common situation. Abductions and strange danger is actually such a small part of what we get exposed to in terms of the danger of abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, emotional abuse, all the abuse you can think of starts with family. And this is why when we're talking about 3-in-1 men are potential abusers, that's a huge statistic. That is actually
Massive.
that's a frightening statistic. And actually women abusers as well is more hidden, it's more taboo. So, but there are probably just as many women who are abusers as well. Okay, so sorry, it's not three, 1 in 3 are abusers, let alone what women might be because it's more taboo. So, I just need that to be understood because a lot of people get shocked, but in fact, they get shocked because they don't want to talk about the elephant in the room. Most people, on average, have experienced abuse in their household, and it's the thing that we don't talk about. We don't talk about it. Okay, that's why people are too scared to confront cases like Laura, not because they can't necessarily believe it, is that they do believe it, but they just don't want to confront it because it taps into their own trauma and abuse. Because most people have had a father who's abused them, most people have had a mother who's abused them, an uncle, a cousin, a family member, a friend that they trusted. This is a very dark and sad part of our reality, and one we really need to be honest about when we're talking about these things.
And it comes to like what I've been sort of looking at in the last few years is that the way on the mass scale of what we're going through, the war is on our children, on our families, like you're saying, Serene and Laura. And the way the solution is to look within yourself, because if you can look at yourself, like I've had to look at myself, and I've had to look at my shadow elements of myself, because I'm a human being that has had fear, and that I've had to go through so many difficult things in my life as well. But I have to look at that in order to move forward. Otherwise, I will never, ever be aligned within myself and know my true power. And essentially, can you imagine how if everyone looked at themselves and started to say, oh, I need to look at that fear. Why am I being triggered, or why am I reacting in a certain way? We're living amongst a massive in a world of victim mentality, unfortunately, and we have to rise above that. That's why human consciousness is so important, and being aware of where we are in consciousness. But yeah, we could talk about that for ages. All right, well. So
Thank you for sharing that, Julie. I really do appreciate it. I think we do have to remember that all of us are being impacted by trauma in one form or another, and hurt people hurt others. Not everyone who's hurts others, but I do see that when I look at the judges, when I see the police officers doing the wrong thing, when I see child protection workers and prosecutors act so cruel, sometimes I think, geez, you must have been really hurt. You must have been really hurt, because I think, geez, that trauma creates so much filth and moral depravity. Because when we say victim mentality, we're actually talking about suppressed trauma.
yeah.
And when we talk about violence, or people who are prone to be violent, and state violence, and state sanctioned violence, also starts by individuals who have not dealt with their trauma. And it's sick stuff. It's sick stuff, honestly, because if you trace it back, sick stuff.
And we're all responsible. There's no such thing as, everyone is responsible for what's happening in our reality, in our collective reality. And it's going to continue to affect people. So maybe so I'll leave the links basically to where people can donate. Also I'll publish this interview on the other channels, BitChute, Rumble, and that sort of thing. Telegram, please sign up to the mailing list. Facebook, I get stuff taken down on Facebook and YouTube these days. So, but I just want to say, Laura, thank you so much for just being here, because you're going to inspire other women, men to stand up and speak, because this is a trauma that we need to look at and continue to speak about. And Serene, thank you for being an angel. I'm so happy to have met you finally.
Thank you. Oh my God, you're an angel. Look, all of you beautiful women. I said Laura is super brave and just eloquent and kind and just so so undeserving of this. And but I see her as this beacon of hope for what needs to be a transformative time for us all globally. Sometimes it takes that tipping point, and it's this beautiful little yoga teacher. The tipping point. I mean, I'm not surprised, but I'm really hoping that everyone can get behind it. And Julia, your platform is so important. I think you need to continue doing this. And being a platform to speak about these issues, because they really are the most important issues to talk about. I mean, I know a lot of people talk about the vaccines, but geez, this thing really triggers me far more than a vaccine, to be honest.
It's the only reason why I wanted to start speaking out. Like, I left my whole, career for this, because it hit me so hard. But yeah, everyone's got a different level of what they went through when I guess everything has happened. But
so proud of you. So proud of that sacrifice you made. I really appreciate that. It's an amazing platform. Please keep going at it. There is so much material in this. There's so much information about this stuff, and this is happening in our country. In one of the most serious and disgusting cases that we've seen in women here in Australia. It's not human rights. It's not a nation that is democratic. It's not a nation that is about protection of children and women. It's not. It is deeply backwards, and we have to recognize that brutality. And I really appreciate you creating that platform, because it's brave for you to do so.
Thanks, Serene. All right, guys, let's finish it up there, and let's just keep you updated on what's happening, and we'll speak to you guys soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.